I'm going to introduce Eric for just 20 seconds, and then we're going to just talk, and then we'll take questions. Eric is a senior partner that runs the North America practice of McKinsey. You've been at the firm maybe for about 3 decades?
Just shy, yeah.
Just shy. And he has worked on different areas that he'll tell us a little bit about. He and I go back a little bit more than 20 years, sort of at a different stage of our careers. Eric would come and be a guest speaker in my class. At that point in time, I was teaching a quantitative pricing class to the MBA program. He was running some projects on price optimization for some of his clients, and that's how we met. Different stage of our lives back then. He's an engineer by training, now running the biggest region of a consulting firm, and we share that because I'm an engineer by training, running a business school, which is in some sense related. So we'll talk about consulting, we'll talk about your life, we'll talk about AI, we'll talk about climate, but you've now been at maybe the leading consulting firm in the world for 30 years, which is a significant chunk of its history, even though its history is almost 100 years. But I can imagine that the firm changed more in the last 30 years than in the first 70 years. I was talking to somebody at Morgan Stanley, and he was telling me in his 34-year career how Morgan Stanley has changed dramatically, and how different it is now than it was, I guess, in the early 90s. So walk us through a little bit your story at McKinsey and the evolution of how you've seen the firm during your tenure.
Okay. Before I do that, first of all, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
It's great to have everyone here. Gosh, you reminded me so much of how we met and some of the things, but you were also doing all of these consulting projects on the side at the time, and I learned more about gambling from college than anyone else because he taught me all about slot machines. And do you remember this? And he literally taught me about the fact is like where you get the payout schedule versus where you put the actual machines really matters because you're trying to draw. Do you remember this? I had totally forgotten about that till just now. See, yeah. we can go to many places now. So my background was, and I'll go through a little bit of a longer story if it's okay. I had never intention of going into business. I grew up the son of a doctor. I had spent my life planning on becoming a doctor. In fact, I was quite certain I was going to become an orthopedic surgeon, in large part because I had so many broken bones playing sports that if I grew up today, there's no question that family services would be at my house. I had 9 short arm casts, three collarbones, 6 broken noses, knee surgery. I mean, fingers didn't even count in my house when I broke them because it happened so frequently. And so I was going to go become an orthopedic surgeon, and it was my junior year in college. I went to Cornell, and I was preparing. I was going to bed to take the MCAT the next morning, so it must have been about April, around this time of year. And I went to bed, and 3 o'clock in the morning, woke up violently ill, like violently ill. And I'm like, is it nerves? Am I sick? I went back to bed. I wake up at 5:30 in the morning. I'm violently ill again. And at this point, I was supposed to meet some friends right across from where the MCAT was going to be, and we're going to grab some breakfast. And I just couldn't, I was shivering and I was feeling badly. And I get into the MCAT, and I remember I had this green Patagonia fleece that I had over my nose, and I had my hat down super low, and I slid open the MCAT, and I open it up, and I start reading the first paragraph. And it took me like 6 minutes to read the first paragraph. And before I finished, I was violently ill again. And I was thrown out of the MCAT. Like literally, they were like, "You're a disruption to the room." I'm like, "Yeah, thanks for asking how I'm feeling. And you have to leave right now." And if you're going to medical school, which obviously folks here have not done, like if you miss the MCAT, you can't go. Like all of a sudden, my life got thrown upside down. And that summer I spent up at school, and I thought a lot about what I wanted. And I remember calling my dad in like July, and I'm like, "Dad, I'm not going to medical school." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've thought about it. That's not what I want to do. I really think the things that I've enjoyed most throughout my time in college had much more to do with business, and I think that's where I'm oriented towards." And so he goes, "Well, what are you going to go?" I'm like, "Well, I'm going to go to McKinsey." He's like, "What the hell's McKinsey?" And I was like, it's this consulting firm. It's like, well, why McKinsey? And this is where you'll learn a little bit about me. I'm like, well, because it's the best, and none of my friends got offers there, so I'm going to go show them that we can do this, right? So it was a total chip on my shoulder type of thing, and I got lucky. I don't even know how it happened. There's no way I'd get hired today. So I joined as a business analyst, and I joined this little office, we call it the Stanford office. I think we now call our Connecticut office. And I thought I was going to be there 18 to 24 months. I was going to leave. That was it. It was like a start of a career. I kind of knew the company I thought I was going to go to. And I just kind of fell in love. And I started getting all these opportunities. And I happened to be an engineer with nothing of what I am today. Like, I had no gray hair. I looked super young. I was a tech kid. And it was the dot-com boom, long before any of you were alive. But like, we had this first dot-com bubble. And all of a sudden, all these clients wanted to hear from me because like I represented what they wanted to know. It's a little bit like if you know AI today. We can talk about bubble as a result. But I started to get opportunities and started to create things with clients. And I ended up going to a client with a partner who took a risk on me when I was still a second-year business analyst. And we went with an idea for a new business. And the client's like, yeah, let's do it. And next thing you know, I am the acting chief operating officer for this new co. And by the way, 25 years later, the company still exists. So it wasn't like we had an idea, it was actually real. And so, you know, I stayed and I kind of did that, and I kind of grew up in the tech practice. And then you get a bunch of curveballs. That first curveball was medical school. I thought I was going, I didn't go. I'm leading our Connecticut office, and I get this phone call from our managing partner that says, I need you to move to California. I said, I'm not going. And 3 conversations later, he called me and said, I'm actually not asking. And so I said, okay, hon, I called my wife and said, we're moving to California, right? And so we moved. And by the way, best thing that ever happened to me professionally and personally, right? All of a sudden, we weren't around all of the kind of broader family. We had our nuclear family, and we grew super close. We had young kids, and we had to learn how to rely on ourselves. And that was a super powerful thing. And I had to learn all these things that I never had to learn because from a work perspective, I had no network in California. I'd barely been to California. How do you do that at that stage of my career? How do you get to a group of partners to want to follow when they didn't really want you there? Right? That was a curve. And I've had a number of these curveballs over the years, and those were in many ways the places where I had the most growth. I gave you 2, but that was a little bit of my story.
So you mentioned people, and I want to ask a question a little bit about the culture of people at McKinsey, simply because that's like super strong.
Yeah.
I'm knowing from my friends that have been there. And also super strong from the alums of McKinsey that then go on to do incredible things that are also some of the people in our orbit. So, you know, that's sort of core to what you guys do. Yeah. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
I'm going to talk about that, and I'm also going to tie back to a question that I didn't answer because in the first half of the question you asked. We have a 2-part mission, right? We have a 2-part mission, and that mission, by the way, is often in conflict with one another. It is about client and enduring client impact, and it is about building a firm that attracts, develops, and retains the best talent on earth. The reason why I say sometimes those things are on conflict is you've got a client situation where you've got this associate who's doing a killer job, and the client's like, you can't let that person go. But what's in the best interest of that person from a development may not be in the best interest of that person, of that client. And so how do you kind of think about those client interests versus people? But the culture of people is so, I mean, that is who we are. That is what we do. Like, we are, like, our IP, our talent is the competitive advantage. And I think we hire the best talent. And by the way, I think there's other firms that hire amazing talent. I think we hire the best. And so the people side of our mission is who we are. And we can talk a little bit about, if we want to, I think some of the ways we went awry over the last couple of years, because I don't think we lived into that mission in a particularly difficult moment quite the way we have. And so a lot of what I spend my time on is about how do you kind of rebuild trust in a broad group of people, a broad group of our colleagues, and really get them oriented towards believing in the mission that I believe so much in. I believe so much in what we do. You also asked the question, what's changed over the years? And the reason I say it ties to, in many ways, since I joined the firm in 1997, the only things that haven't changed are our missions, our purpose, and our values. And our purpose did because we didn't have one, but the purpose sort of came from our mission and our values. And so I actually think that's part of what's so exciting about our firm, is that we do change that much, that over a 28-year period, it is unrecognizable.
How much bigger is it?
Oh, I mean, I don't even know what the size of the firm was when I joined, but I'll kind of frame it this way. When I became a partner of the firm, I remember it was this moment of amazing, happiness and sense of accomplishment. And I remember all of a sudden that literally leaving immediately when I went to our first global partner meeting. And at the time, it was Ian Davis, who was the managing partner. And the tradition, if you ask all the new partners to stand up, and you stand up and you look around and go, oh my goodness, I'm at the bottom of this totem pole of 700 people, 600 and something people. It was like this moment of like, wait a minute, maybe I didn't, I'm not that important anymore. We're now a little over 3,000 partners to kind of give you a sense. If I were betting when I joined the firm, we were 4,000 to 5,000 people, let's say 5,000, and we're about 40,000 today. So it's a massively different firm. By the way, if I were guessing, we were in 30 countries then, we're in 62 countries today. So it's a very, very different firm. On some of the work we do is different, right? I mean, when I joined a successful project, you handed to your client this thing we called a blue book. It was a document, and it said, go forth and prosper, right? Like, here's your roadmap. Like, most of what we do today is we actually are we're accountable with our clients for the impact to changing what they do, how they do it. I never would have imagined that when I joined the firm. I would never imagine that hands-on keyboards is something we do. I would never have imagined the profiles of people we would hire. And so there's nothing about the firm that I recognize besides the mission, the purpose, and the values. And I think that's actually kind of cool. I think it's kind of cool that there's this red thread that I don't think will ever change on this, but that is the only kind of stable backbone we have. Everything else is agile. You run to where the opportunity is, and we are incredibly good and quick about doing that. And I think that's fascinating.
So I'll ask you a little bit of the work, but I'll tell you what they told me when I got tenure about 20 years ago. They said, congratulations, not all your problems became permanent.
Yeah, that's true.
So you mentioned the change in the type of projects that you do, the type of how you deliver value to the clients.
Yeah.
The fact that you almost deliver products now to your clients.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through a little bit that?
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Because that's like, it used to be that you would stop at a different stage and you would engage for different types of questions, right?
So I'm going to compare and contrast literally from my second project ever at the firm to an experience that happened in the last 2 or 3 days, just to kind of give you a sense of where I think we are. And there are some commonalities, but there's way more differences. So I remember starting, and the first day on this project, what we now call APs, we used to call SEMs. Think of these as the folks just before they become partners. So they are in many ways acting as the leaders, the engagement directors, the ones accountable for the work. And there was a gentleman by the name of Jayant Sinha who went on to do incredible things in the Indian government. He's actually, his father is particularly famous there, but he played a big role. Jayant stood up on the first day, and I was this like wide-eyed, bushy-tailed business analyst who didn't know anything about business. I was an engineer who was supposed to be a medical doctor. And he literally goes to this whiteboard, which, to tell you how old I am, the whiteboard, you literally could press a button and it would print the page, right? And you'd have to then rip, like, I realized none of this.
They don't know that.
They have no idea. Like, there's so many things I realized, just such different experiences. But you'd go to the whiteboard and he just drew out, I think it was either 9 or 12 boxes, and he ghosted the document for the first progress review. By the way, I'll tell you a funny story about how silly I was. But he kind of goes through and he writes the titles and he draws out what it's supposed to look like. And I'm like, how do you know how to do that? And the answer is 75% of the documents we created all said the same thing. It was all situation, complication, resolution. And you kind of knew what the situation, complication, it's kind of what if you've been around for long enough, you knew what it was. My silly mistake was I'm like color by numbers. I don't know, I'm a silly BA. So I'm like, here's my 4 pages. And I go do the analysis, and I literally write the title of the chart just as he'd done it, and I do the analysis, and the analysis says nothing about what's on the title of the page. It was a complete opposite. And he's like, why would you write that title? I'm like, well, you wrote the title. He's like, I need you to think. I need you to think. But the broader point is that project was about delivering the situation, the complication, and the resolution. that we then handed to our clients and said, you guys have to go do. So the conversation I had the last 2 days, I took 40 people to Silicon Valley. We took them on 4 visits of companies that I think are going to change the world through
40
AI.
partners or clients?
Your partners. 40 senior partners.
Your partners, yeah.
Think about it, 40 senior partners. That is a real investment of time on their behalf, on my behalf. We literally went to these 4 tech firms that I think are further advanced in some of the application of AI in the context of business. And at the end of which I said, I now want you to think about one of your clients, and I want you to write them a memo. And then I happened to be at a dinner last night when I got here, and this came up in the context of it. We picked a life insurance company, happened to be based in New York City. I know the CEO quite well. He's a tech guy. I've known him for a long time. And so the senior partner that was there said, here's what we're going to do. Here's what that business looks like today. Here's what that business is going to look like in 3 years' time if we do our job. And we're going to paint a vision for that CEO of how he can revolutionize what his business looks like. But we're going to do it all through the lens of the way we're going to apply AI. And then we're going to inspire him to paint that vision for his entire organization and take them on a 3-year journey. And we're going to be there every step of the way. We would never have done that before. We would never have been so bold to say, that's the North Star of where you're going to get to. But do you think you can get there on your own? No. We're going to take you on that journey.
How big of a team would that take?
Oh, I think this could be 100 colleagues on the ground of all different profiles.
Whereas in the past, you would be
3
6,
people. It was we built the firm EM plus 2 at a time.
Yeah.
Right? You'd have an engagement manager, 2, a BA, an associate. You have this AP, and then you have a partner, and then the senior partners would never show up, and you didn't know what they did, and they were doing all kinds of other, now we have 100 people on the ground.
In addition, it used to be that they were all business people, and right now,
now we have
100 people, there will be engineers, there will be designers, there will
totally
be
different.
Right, totally different mix. I'll go back to AI because this is near and dear to both of us. But trends in the industry, what do you think about what's happening to consulting as a business, as an industry? Where is it growing? What do you think about the future? I'm optimistic, but that's what I tell our students. But.
I say this all the time. I've now been here, I've been at the firm 28 years. And I, as I say, I know I'm in my last decade because I will retire by the time I'm 60, and I just turned 50. And so I know I'm in the last 10 years, or as some would say, I am deep into the back 9. I think this next 10 years is going to be the best 10 years that I will have witnessed at that point in 40 years. And I think it should be the most exciting time for folks like you to think about where you are from your own journeys in your career. And the reason I say this is, and I will walk through an example that folks inside the firm have heard all too much from me. But I was at Dreamforce last year. In fact, apparently someone sent me, I am in their advertisement now. I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm in their advertisement now with other colleague. And Mark Benioff stood up, and Mark is an incredible sales guy, and he's incredibly good at painting a vision, and he kind of came up with this concept of Agent Force, and I didn't really understand what he was talking about. And then they stood up and they showed Saks Fifth Avenue. And I can talk about this because they talk about it publicly. And the Saks Fifth Avenue example goes something like this. And they went through 2 live demonstrations. These were things that they had in production. We have all, I think even true today, all called some 800 number and got stuck in IVR hell, where all you want to do is yell, can I please talk to a human? So now,
there are good Saturday Night Live skits on that.
Oh, I'm sure. And I had this the other day with my bank. I'm like, I would think at this point my bank would just pick up, if they see my number, someone would pick up the other side. So now if you call the 1-800 number for Saks, the conversation goes like this. Hey, Eric, it's Molly. How do I help you today? And you're like, how'd they know who I was? Well, obviously they know my phone number because they see where I'm calling from. I say, hey, Molly, I'm calling about something I bought last week. I said, I bought this sweater. And she goes, well, is it the gray one? I said, yeah, it's the gray one. Is everything okay with the sweater? And I say, yeah, everything's okay. I think I bought the wrong size. And she goes, okay, well, would you like a larger or smaller? I said, I think I'd like a medium. Would you mind, And she goes, great, hold on. Great, can I have that shipped out tomorrow? Is the address still this address? I said, yeah, that'd be great. She goes, it'll be there by Friday. And I said, oh, I had this dinner on Thursday night I was planning on going to. I was really hoping to wear the sweater. And she goes, hold on a minute. And she goes, well, can you get to the Stanford Mall? I live in California, Palo Alto. And she goes, can you get to the Stanford Mall? Because they're going to hold it for you there. Just ask for Tom. He's behind the front desk in the men's department. I said, that sounds great. She goes, bring the other one. We'll exchange it. It's all good. That whole thing was done by an agent. There's no human interaction whatsoever. But from my point of view, it was like talking to a human. And it solved all my problems. And for those that are into AI, I can give you the 100 reasons why, or you can give me the 100 reasons why. The scripting on that is not that hard. There are not that many options. It's relatively straightforward. But think about what that does and how the world starts to change. And we think about how to improve the customer experience with all, screw that. Like, I can reinvent the customer experience. The next example they went through was probably not, I get invited to a festive cocktail attire. I don't know what festive cocktail is. But if I go on their chatbot and I say, I've got they're like, well, here's all the things that we can put together from what you've already bought. And if you then want to buy these 3 other things, I'm like, this is brilliant. I can actually look good for once. So it was like what I call the reimagine moment. Like, we have to start reimagining what business will look like, what industries will look like. And when I think about what McKinsey does, what we do in consulting, we get to do everything I just described for their life insurance company. I get to help a CEO inspire that individual to think about the world totally differently. And then I can give them the confidence that they can actually get there. I call it the man on the moon or the person on the moon moment. The things that you did not think were possible are now possible, but you have to be willing to change. And it is 20% a technology problem. That's the thing I love about this. It is 20% a technology problem. It is 80% a business problem. And in that 20%, it is actually relatively simple technology. This is like low code, no code. I can do it. Like to program agents, it is not that complicated. We were just at ServiceNow on this trip, and they're like, yeah, it's all no code. My partner's like, what do you mean no code? Like, you don't have to actually code anything. Like, it is, when you actually watch what the AIs do, the agents do, they talk in natural language. It's so cool. You can literally watch them interact, and it's like watching 2 individuals interact, and you guys know this way better than I do. So when I look at the next 10 years, I tell everyone, I think this could be the best 10 years we've ever seen, both in terms of what we get to do, the impact that will get felt, but also what that means in terms of opportunities for our people for the next generation. I'm super bullish, until people get afraid. I'm not afraid. Like, I've watched back to the whiteboard and the facts. Like, I've watched how the world's evolved and the types of problems we can solve. The AI is not doing this on its own. It's a 20% technology problem. So I am super bullish.
Okay, so let's switch to AI. So what are you guys doing internally?
Yeah.
And then I have some follow-up.
So there's a lot we're doing internally. So I'm going to hit on a couple of things. One is every one of our sectors, every one of our capabilities, functions, strategy, GM, growth, marketing, and sales, operations, and the service lines that sit below are all now being tasked to rewire. We call it rewiring everything that they do. And a lot of that is automating, which is a lot of what the AI does, things that you can do today with humans. The great example is I made a living for a long time by walking into a CEO's office with a particular chart, which I called the growth spread matrix. And it basically said, if you want to get your value to here, we either have to get the growth to here or the margin or the return on capital to here. So let's talk about how we do that. And we talk about the different ways that you can get there and how to decompose that. That used to be weeks of an analyst to go do that for me. It's now at the click of a button. It's not even a click of a button. I literally type in, I'd like this chart, and it shows up. So that's in our strategy and corporate finance practice. Every one of our practices is now going through and saying, how do we do that?
You've built in-house tools?
Yeah, and so then I'm going to talk about the big one that we have then built something called Lily. And there's a whole reason why it's called Lily. It has to be the first, I think it was the first woman partner. And so we named it after the first woman partner. And Lily's pretty magical. Now, some people will tell you Lily's not as magical as we like to talk about it being. I think when you understand what it's doing, it is actually pretty magical because of its ability to go through the corpus of information that sits within the firm, as well as the corpus of information that is available through OpenAI and all of the various forms of things that are out there. And, what it can do for us today is actually quite remarkable. So if I'm going to go see a CEO, Molly, who works a lot with me over here, and was not the same Molly agent, that is actually a true story. It was named Molly. I will often say, I'm going to go see the CEO, or I'm going to go do this talk, like I want to know a profile. The reality is today I can get all that. I can get all the history on what we've ever done with this person, who they know that I know, and it's literally by asking a question to Lily, which I can do right now on my phone. And it comes back instantaneously. But equally, if I'm going to go see the CEO, I would ask, what are the 5 things on their mind? What are the 3 questions they should ask me? What are the 5 questions I should ask them? And you'd be shocked at how good the answer is. And so Lily is this incredible tool, and we're adding more and more to it. So it can now do a lot of the charts that our associates and BAs used to do. You can type in, I need an outline of a document that does this, back to that, what that SEM did the first day. Like, it will generate that for you, and I can edit it, and it does all these things. And some will say, well, gosh, doesn't that mean you don't have to do? No, the answer is, it means I can spend more time on the much more difficult part. And the latest thing we've done, which I think I just find it's fascinating. It's just very interesting to see. We created persona-based agents, which is kind of the next generation of where we're heading. And we did one of a business analyst, we did one of a data engineer, we did one of the engagement manager, and of the engagement director, the partner. And we gave it the identical problem that we had spent 13 weeks doing at a client. And we wanted to see what came out the other side. And what came out, and it took about 18 hours, was virtually identical to what came out of the team over 13 weeks. And now, it's a little bit of an unfair comparison because we gave it all the data that the team had collected over the course of time. But it was super interesting to see, that the answers were virtually identical. That was actually very reassuring. It goes back to our problem-solving approach, yields, independent of person, a great answer, or a common answer. The other thing that was fascinating is because, remember, I said it's natural language. You could go watch all the interactions. You watch the BA talk to the data engineer. I need to figure out how to do X. Data engineer comes back and says this. And they'd go back to the ED, and the ED say, well, but that's inconsistent with how I've thought about this. Because they all have different corpuses of things that they're thinking about in the way they. It was really interesting because it said that the engagement manager, which has actually always been the linchpin of what we do, was virtually absent from the conversation. But the reason for me that was so interesting is I have found our EMs, or we now call them team leaders, to become process managers and not thought leaders. And one of my frustrations, and we're now addressing in North America, is the engagement manager back in my day used to send voicemails. Now you'd send a weekly email, which was the update of what the partners and senior partners needed to make sure they're aware of. And I get back such crap. Like, it is honestly crap. And I get super mad when I read these, because they typically come on Friday nights, which then I read, or they come on Sunday nights. So it's like at the bookend of my weekend. And they're like all process. And I don't like process. It's not what I do for a living. It's not what gets me up in the morning. And the fact that the only thing that these EMs are doing is process in my mind, and then I see what's going on in this persona-based agent, is I don't need them for process anymore. And so they've been left out. Tells me we have to completely revamp the role of the EM and how we train. And that was reaffirming as well. Wow. So it's been fascinating to watch. And the changes are daily. I mean, it's amazing to see what, I will also say, more in your world. So I've got 3 kids. My middle one just got into college. But I watch how he studies now. He goes and collects the tests he's taken over the course of the year. He goes, and he literally says to whatever, I don't know if it's ChatGPT, he's like, create an exam for me that has got 30 multiple choice questions. It's got 5 problems. And I'm like totally blown away that he would and how good the exam is. Must be nice to be a professor now. You can just ask ChatGPT to come up with it.
What we need to do is create automated graders. That's what we need to do.
It grades his exams on.
When we talk about AI, we talk about what it can do. The capabilities are there. You very astutely mentioned that, well, that's just like 1/5 of what we need to do. And getting organizations to move, processes to change, people to change takes time. So in some sense, when you're thinking about that time dimension, I'm pretty sure that the models and the capabilities are going to be there, in a few years, certainly within this decade. Will the world be sort of massively reimagined by the end of this decade, or will it take an extra decade? Or I used to tell my kids, so that they will never have to learn how to drive. And of course, now I'm eating my words, because they're all doing driving lessons here in New York. So what do you think is going to be sort of the time scale over which things are going to percolate through industry?
So you remember I said I lived through the first dot-com bust, and we might have some things to learn about that from an AI point of view. I generally believe anytime you get this level of run-up, it is a little bit of a bubble. And the reality is we may live into the hype one day, but never as fast as we think we will. I think this is a 10 to 20 year, but probably closer to 20-year evolution as opposed to revolution. I believe the technology will happen faster, but it is the change. I mean, there's been technology that has been available and capable for a long time. It is the change management that is always difficult. And I also believe you don't always have the right incentives inside of an organization to make change. So I had this debate with these 40 senior partners over dinner the other night, where a bunch of them were like, well, let me tell you what the CIO says. And I'm like, guys, if we're in the CIO's office, we've lost the plot. And it's not that I don't have a ton of respect for the CIOs, and they are 100% part of this equation, but they have no incentive to think about this vision, right? That's way more work. It has way more questions on their budget. It's way more it's not what they're naturally inclined to do, which is why I think this is a CEO topic more than anything. And it will take time. This will take time. By the way, if I'm the CEO today, I am thinking about, how do I make this change? Where are the points I can start to show that it's real? But equally, what do I have to do? Because we don't like to talk about this. Again, we will see if we go into recession now. My very good friend Tom Barkin, who's the Richmond Fed chair, has taught me over the last several years, when I thought for sure we were going to in recession in 2022, the United States has never gone into a recession when we've had full employment. We are still at full employment. And I could argue, especially with some of the policies that are out there today, there's no chance we won't be full employment, right? We don't have enough folks coming in. We don't have enough visas that are being issued. We have birth rates that have been declining for some time. We are at full employment. The issue is actually we don't have enough people, and that is what's holding us back. And so you have a mismatch potentially of skill and what we need, but we can't actually, in fact, McKinsey wrote a report, the NGI, you can look it up. I'm sure we can send it to everyone, that talks about this birth rate issue. It is a very real issue, right? I'm going to pick on South Korea for a moment. South Korea will literally be at 10% of its current population in 3 generations. And we're going to think about that for a minute. That's not me, that is literally math. They're at an 0.82 fertility rate. They generate less than 1 child per woman. That literally means over 3 generations, we will be down to 10%. That's a massive issue. If you think about GDP growth is productivity times people, labor. If the population does not change and it is going the wrong way, the only potential to maintain what we are used to living like and GDP growth that will, by the way, grow ourselves out of the debt problem, if we believe that's even possible, is through productivity. This technology is actually a savior, but you still have a mismatch, right? I mean, let's make it real in the context of AI. We don't have enough data centers. Whether you believe in open source and DeepSeek or whether you believe in, we don't have enough data centers. That's a labor problem. Let's assume we had enough data centers. We don't have enough power, right? We have money that can go generate power, but we don't have enough power. How do you create more power? You need to go build. Who's building? We don't have labor. So we have this mismatch, right? But I believe without this type of AI, and so the CEOs are thinking about, how do I reskill? How do I get people oriented to things that I'm going to need them to do? That's a real challenge. How do I elevate up? Because a lot of the things, go back to that IVR example. I don't think I think 10 years from now, we won't have an IVR.
How do you reskill your partners?
I mean, this is why, so this is fascinating. one of the things I have learned is I still think of myself as the BA when I joined the firm 28 years ago. Like, that is how I think of myself. Unfortunately, that's not how many others view me. So it is this cognitive dissonance that I go through every day. It does help you not take yourself too seriously.
Right.
But the thing that I have learned is the few influence mechanisms I have is who I choose. And so inviting 40 senior partners and making it very public that we were going and then we're going to do a dinner at my house, and it was this somewhat hand-selected group. Now everyone goes, wait a minute, how do I get on that list? And so now those 40 people are going back and they're talking to their CSTs, their client service teams, their cells about that experience and what they're going to do differently. And now everyone's like, how do I get to go do the same? And so we're now inviting some of these tech firms to engage with our client service teams about how do we create that vision that I just described. And my hope is that that means everyone's going to wake up every day and say, how do I get engaged in that type of conversation? How do I learn? How do I live into this reimagine moment? And so the thing that I can do to influence that is make it very visible to the folks that folks are doing it and make everyone else jealous so they start to say, I want to be part of that, and then they start to change their behavior. But it's hard. It is super hard, and frankly, I don't personally do enough. Like, I play with our tools, but I've not ingrained them in every day. It is too easy for me to leverage all the folks that are around me to get them to do it as opposed to me do it, and I should do way more of it.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about climate, and then I want to talk a little bit about you and about them.
Yeah.
So, AI is a huge driver of change, and I think it's actually going to be very good for consulting firms. It's going to sort of keep you busy for quite some time. The other thing that is going to keep you busy, I think, is climate. Sort of trying to affect the climate transition over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years is going to be sort of a huge project. And what are your thoughts about that, both in terms of your business and in terms of the time?
This is an existential question and issue. It is also one that is going to be way closer to 50 years than it is going to be closer to 20 or 30 years.
That's why I said 50.
We actually published on this as part of COP28. We actually wrote at McKinsey Global Institute, and I actually thought this was the best thing I've seen on this because I think it was the most real. It was the most truthful. We lived through a bubble, if you will, where there's been an enormous amount, and I would argue more from this generation than from mine, than ours, of this is a moment we have to change immediately. But the reality is, I think there's two things we have to get our head around. Most people are inherently lazy and don't change, right? And the example I'm going to give is just look at how many gym memberships start on January 1st and end by March 31st. People are inherently lazy and don't change unless there's amazing self-interest. And for a lot of people, we're talking about something that's 30 years out as opposed to something that is immediate, and that's a hard thing for people to get their head around. The second is, if you wanted to go do and get this problem solved in the shorter duration, we neither have the technology nor the literally dollars to invest, right? It would be half of the global GDP to invest in this, and that we just don't have the ability to do. And so what this research effort basically laid out is there's a pathway to get there in roughly the same time that we think is reasonable, whether you use a net zero technology or you go through an intermediate stage. One is way cheaper and way more likely to achieve the outcome we all want. It will also be way more inclusive because the challenge you have is, not to be arrogant, I can afford an electric car. I can afford putting solar panels on my house. I've done both those things. We drive electric cars. It's actually, the way we do it is probably better for the environment. But most people can't afford that. And by the way, most of the energy generation is not, it's not affordable if it is all clean. And so you have to be careful not to leave people behind. And there are big swaths of the world that you would leave people behind. So I happen to believe this pathway of we should be moving towards technologies that are readily available and are way better than what are out there today. It is way better to have a natural gas fired plant than it is to have a coal plant. Way better. Is that net zero? 100% not. 100% not. But if I can go there and then I am building the next generation of energy that are cleaner than that, we will get there. And it will give time for technologies that I think are going to be super important. I happen to believe in things like direct air capture, right? That is a technology that is starting to be possible, but it is actually not all that clean yet. It has implications on water.
Yep.
I also think you will see, I believe we will get there on fusion, but that is probably a 20 or 30 year, like, I do think the technologies will get there. There's enough focus and investment, but I think we have to be realistic about the time.
You know, when I was about to start my PhD, I was going to work on control of plasma flows on tokamak reactors. For those of you that know anything about fusion, this is the prevailing technology in fusion. Thankfully, I didn't do it because we're like 35 years later and we still don't know how to solve that problem. We need to move to take questions. Before we do that, you've had a 28-year run, which I'm sure has kept you incredibly busy. You have clearly grown to be one of the top leaders in the firm. I'm not going to ask you for your philosophy on leadership. I want to ask you, what do you do to relax? Because I'm sure we all need that. And what do you do?
I believe in a work hard, play hard philosophy. And for those that know me, know that I am generally I work pretty hard. I actually would tell you I work harder today than I did when I was a business analyst, which I am sure I did not believe that was possible when I was a business analyst, but I can promise you it is. But I work because I get an enormous amount of energy from it. So it is not for me work. I've said with the exception of an 18-month period, which is my last 18 months as a CFO, I've run to work for almost all 28 years. I mean, that is a privilege and a gift that I have loved what I have done for 28 years. The play hard part is like, I work out every day. So my assistant knows I must have an hour and a half where I go to the gym. I did it at 6:30 this morning, right? That is super important to me. It is part of my play hard. I am a pretty avid golfer and I play a lot of golf. And one of the things that's been great about the last few years, I play with my two boys. So every Saturday and Sunday I am home. And one of the benefits of living in California, that can be all year. We go play, if we're not doing the other thing, which I do from a play point of view, which is I ski. I was a ski instructor back in college. My kids all ski. My wife was a ski instructor. We go, the rule between December 15th and April 15th is I have to be home by Friday at 3 o'clock, no matter where I am in the world, because that's when the kids get home from school and we go up to the mountains. And so I have found ways to really bring those passions and the things that the family love and care about into the day-to-day life. And then I don't believe in, so what I'm about to say is going to be super uninspiring, but I'd ask you to think about it. I don't believe in this work-life balance. I actually think that's horseshit. I think you get to a balance when you love what you do and you combine the two together. So my family is absolutely, I would say I have two families, right? And I think it's okay for me to have these two families. I have my actual family and I have my work family. And one of the privileges of being in a partnership is it is really a family. I love my partners. I don't always like them, but I love them. It's like family. And I bring those two together. So we're going to the Masters next week because we host this big thing. It happens to be my favorite week of the year. My family comes down too, and they're going to participate in all the activities we have at night, which is going to be them and CEO. My son came to this other golf tournament at the Amex that I played in, and I introduced him to all these CEOs that are all my friends that I met all the years. They now get to experience life at work and life at home, and it's all brought together. And for me, that's actually been great. It's allowed me to be who I am, but it actually gives them a very different, and one of the things I've been super proud of is, I used to say, I don't know that I'm going to win any Father of the Year awards because I am on the road all the time. But watching particularly my 18 and 19-year-old now at the stage of life where they are at, and them having an appreciation for what I have done and how I do it and the way I work, and to see that now embedded within them might be the greatest source of joy that I have. Because it means I didn't fail as a dad. I actually instilled a set of values and principles in them that make me super proud of who they've become. And I think that's winning. I truly think that's winning.
Thank you so much for coming,
Pleasure
Eric.
to be here.
It's very nice to reconnect. And thank you for all that you do for our school. Because you're...
Thank you. And I'm always happy to take more questions. You can find my email. Don't be afraid to send them. I'm super responsive. Thank you, Costis. It was a pleasure. Thank you.